Chapter 4. The Individual and Authenticity. 4.1 Defining the Self. The concept of the self is central to existentialist thought. Existentialism, a philosophical movement that emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, emphasizes the individual's unique position as a self-determining agent responsible for the authenticity of their existence. The self is not a static entity, but a dynamic process of becoming, shaped by personal choices and the meanings we ascribe to our experiences. It is through this continual process of self-definition that individuals forge their essence and identity. To begin with, the self is understood as the subject of one's own life. In existentialism, the individual is always seen as being in a state of becoming, constantly facing choices that reaffirm or alter their identity. The importance placed on personal decision-making underscores the belief that the self is not merely a given fact, but something that each individual must actively construct. At the heart of this self-making is the concept of consciousness, which enables reflection, imagination, and the capacity to envision different futures. Consciousness in existentialism is not passive, it is always directed towards something, making it intentional in philosophical terms. This intentionality means that our awareness is always about things. We are conscious of something, whether it be an external object, an emotional state, or an abstract idea. Hence, the self can be seen as a project, continually shaped by intentions and the pursuit of goals that extend beyond the present. This forward-looking aspect of the self implies that one's identity is continually in flux, as new experiences and choices are integrated into one's life narrative. However, defining the self is not solely a matter of internal reflection, but also involves interaction with the external world. The self exists in a social and physical environment that can both enable and constrain personal growth. Human relationships, cultural norms, and material conditions can either affirm or challenge an individual's sense of self. In navigating these environmental factors, people craft unique personal narratives that incorporate their interactions with the world. The self, therefore, is also a social construct, emerging through dialogue with others and the society at large. Authenticity is a key aspect of the existentialist understanding of the self. To be authentic is to live in accordance with one's true nature, to act in harmony with one's own values and beliefs, rather than conforming to external pressures or societal expectations. Authenticity involves a degree of introspection and self-awareness that allows individuals to recognize and take ownership of their desires, fears, and capacities. It requires an honest engagement with one's potentialities and limitations, leading to actions that are consistent with one's individual essence. The journey towards authenticity is fraught with difficulties. It demands the courage to face the absurd, the inherent meaninglessness of existence, and to nevertheless construct meaning through one's choices. Existential philosophers point out the tendency of many to flee from the responsibility of this self-definition, opting for what Sartre calls bad faith, an inauthentic existence where one denies their own freedom and follows a path prescribed by others. Overcoming bad faith is central to living an authentic life, which is seen as a primary route to personal fulfillment. An individual's realization that they are not defined by predetermined essences or social roles can lead to what existentialists refer to as existential angst, a profound uneasiness stemming from the awareness of one's absolute freedom and the weight of responsibility it entails. This angst arises when one recognizes the contingency of their existence and the lack of inherent purpose in the world. The self is tasked with creating its own purpose through the choices it makes, a daunting but potentially liberating prospect. The existentialist perspective on the self also adopts the concept of facticity, which refers to the concrete details against which the self's freedom is asserted. These facts include one's past, body, social identity, and various unchangeable circumstances. These factors must be acknowledged, for they provide the context within which freedom is exercised. However, the self is not utterly determined by these aspects, rather, it has the capacity to transcend facticity through the choices it makes. Another aspect of defining the self is the confrontation with mortality. The awareness of death serves as a crucial point of reflection for existentialists, as it underscores the finite nature of human existence. This confrontation can inspire a sense of urgency and clarify what is truly important, motivating individuals to seek an authentic way of being. The finitude of life throws into relief the significance of each choice and the authentic creation of the self. Finally, the existentialist view of the self is one of radical responsibility. Each person is responsible not just for their actions, but for the person they become. This conception of the self is empowering but also demanding, as it places the onus of moral and existential meaning squarely on the individual. To exist authentically is to recognize and embrace this responsibility, shaping a life that reflects one's deepest convictions and aspirations. Existentialism presents the self as a dynamic and ongoing project that is grounded in individual freedom and responsibility. The journey toward authenticity is as challenging as it is essential, demanding a confrontation with the realities of facticity and mortality. Defining the self is an act of creation, a personal endeavor that is both influenced by and transcendent of the external world. It is this ceaseless striving towards an authentic existence that encapsulates the existentialist vision of what it means to be truly human. 4.2. The journey towards authenticity. Authenticity is a cornerstone concept in existentialist philosophy, reflecting the individual's pursuit of a genuine self amidst a myriad of societal pressures and existential uncertainties. For existential thinkers such as Jean-Paul Sartre, Martin Heidegger, and Simone de Beauvoir, being authentic involves embracing one's freedom and acknowledging the responsibility that comes with making choices that define one's essence. This journey toward authenticity is not a predefined path, but an ongoing process, characterized by introspection, decision-making, and personal growth. The first step in the quest for authenticity is self-awareness. An individual must become acutely aware of their existence, their consciousness, and their place in the world. It necessitates a kind of introspective inventory where one scrutinizes their motivations, values, and beliefs. This reflective process is fundamental because it reveals the extent to which these internal compasses are truly one's own or simply internalized from external sources. It challenges individuals to ask themselves if they are living according to their own standards or conforming to roles and expectations imposed by society. Self-awareness leads to the recognition of freedom and the burdensome weight of choice. Existentialists posit that individuals are condemned to be free, as Sartre famously stated, meaning that the freedom to choose one's path is inescapable. However, acknowledging this freedom also unveils the vast array of possibilities and the responsibility for the outcomes of one's decisions. Each choice signifies a commitment and simultaneously a rejection of alternative possibilities, forging one's unique trajectory through life. The realization that one is solely responsible for their actions is both empowering and daunting, as it removes the safety net of deterministic or fatalistic excuses. Engaging with this freedom, the individual grapples with the concept of bad faith, a term Sartre used to describe the evasion of authenticity through self-deception. Bad faith occurs when someone ignores the reality of their freedom by conforming to social roles or attributions that limit their potential. The journey toward authenticity necessitates a confrontation with bad faith tendencies, an examination of where one's genuine desires have been compromised for comfort or due to fear. Overcoming bad faith is about aligning one's actions with their true self, which can often require significant changes in behavior or lifestyle. Another pivotal aspect of the journey toward authenticity is embracing angst, sometimes translated as existential anxiety. This form of anxiety is not pathological, but is a natural response to the realization of one's freedom and the inevitability of choice. It arises from the understanding of life's inherent uncertainty and the absence of absolute guidelines for making decisions. Rather than being a paralyzing force, angst can be transformative, prompting the individual to act purposefully and to make choices that are genuinely their own, in spite of the uncertain outcomes. As individuals navigate through choices, they encounter what existentialists call the other. The presence of others in the world presents a paradoxical challenge. On one hand, others are a source of validation and recognition. Social interaction is necessary for the individual's existence to be acknowledged. On the other hand, the other can be a source of alienation and objectification, reducing one's existence to that of an object within the other's world. Authenticity is found in the balance of acknowledging the value and perspective of others, while not allowing these external views to define one's self-identity. The existential journey recognizes the inescapable reality of mortality. Death is the ultimate horizon that imbues life with urgency and meaning. The individual's confrontation with their finitude heightens the importance of living authentically. Every moment and every decision assumes greater significance because life is finite. Authenticity thus involves a recognition of death as a motivating force, not as a source of despair, but as a catalyst to live more fully and with intention. Commitment is a vital element in the pursuit of authenticity. Commitments are the tangible expressions of an individual's values and choices. They are the real-life manifestations of one's authentic self. Commitments can take various forms, such as personal relationships, career paths, or causes to which one dedicates their efforts. The key to authenticity is not the specific content of the commitments, but the extent to which they resonate with the individual's true self and chosen values. The journey towards authenticity also necessitates a re-evaluation of the past. One's life history is not a series of random events, but a narrative that the individual has the power to interpret and ascribe meaning to. The past can be a source of insight or a chain that holds one back. Authenticity involves owning one's story, accepting past choices, and, where possible, reframing or learning from past experiences to inform future decisions. Authenticity fosters resilience. In the process of seeking authenticity, an individual is likely to encounter resistance, both internally and from society. Staying true to one's path requires resilience in the face of conformity, criticism, and self-doubt. This resilience is fortified by the deep conviction that one's course of action is aligned with their genuine self. It is the knowledge that authenticity, once achieved, provides a sense of integrity and inner peace that fortifies the individual against life's challenges. Lastly, the journey towards authenticity is never complete. It is a perpetual process of growth, re-evaluation, and adjustment as individuals encounter new experiences and insights. What is authentic at one stage of life may be different at another, as individuals evolve and their contexts change. The quest for authenticity is about remaining open to this evolution, continually asking the fundamental existential questions and seeking an honest relationship with oneself. It is a dynamic, lifelong engagement with the essence of being human. The journey towards authenticity is a complex, nuanced, and deeply personal endeavor. It is filled with challenges and requires a commitment to self-understanding, acceptance of freedom, and responsibility. Authenticity is the process by which individuals seek to live in accordance with their own values and beliefs, despite external pressures, and it is an essential pursuit for those who wish to live a fulfilling existential life. 4.3. Conformity and bad faith. Conformity in the context of existentialism refers to the act of aligning one's behaviors and thoughts with societal norms and expectations. It often involves the sublimation of the individual's personal desires and existential truths in favor of a more generalized or accepted mode of existence. Through conformity, individuals tend to adopt roles and identities prescribed by their culture, family, or social structures, without critical examination or personal endorsement of these roles. Though some degree of conformity is necessary for social cohesion and functioning, existentialists argue that excessive conformity undermines personal freedom and authenticity. Authenticity, a central concept in existentialist thought, is the degree to which an individual lives in accordance with their own self-determined values and beliefs, as opposed to those imposed by external forces. It requires self-awareness and a genuine connection with one's own experience, aspirations, and existential realities. Embracing authenticity entails recognizing personal responsibility for one's own existence and choices. This recognition often comes with the acceptance of the inherent lack of inherent meaning in the world, leading the individual to construct their own purpose and value. Bad faith, mauvais foi, is a term introduced by the French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre to describe the psychological state in which an individual denies their freedom and responsibility. It is the opposite of authenticity. In bad faith, a person deceives themselves to escape the existential anxiety that comes with the awareness of the freedom to shape their own existence. Sartre argued that bad faith is a form of self-deception where the individual hides the truth of their freedom from themselves, thus living inauthentically. Conformity can lead to bad faith when individuals capitulate to the roles imposed upon them, without acknowledgement of their own capacity to transcend these roles. This capitulation involves a deliberate or unconscious refusal to acknowledge their ability to make choices outside the norms and expectations of society. The danger of this lies in the stifling of personal growth and the renunciation of personal responsibility for the shape of one's life. The existentialist view argues that even within the bounds of social roles and norms, individuals have the freedom to interpret and renegotiate these parameters from a place of personal understanding. In other words, even when fulfilling societal roles, individuals can maintain authenticity by making deliberate choices about how to engage with these roles, rather than merely acting out of compulsion or habituation. This can be achieved through reflection, critical thinking, and the continuous assessment of one's beliefs and actions. The idea of the look or the gaze, le regard, another Sartrean concept, pertains to how the individual's awareness of how others view them can lead to self-objectification. When individuals become too absorbed in how they are perceived, they may start to identify with these external perceptions, losing touch with their own internal perspective. Such preoccupation with the gaze of the other can be a catalyst for conformity and subsequently, bad faith, as it causes individuals to live inauthentically through the eyes of others rather than through their own subjective experience. To resist conformity and bad faith, existentialists suggest cultivating a stance of perpetual questioning and self-exploration. This includes challenging societal values, exploring alternative ways of being, and embracing the uncertainty that comes with forging one's path. The process involves a willingness to confront the uncomfortable aspects of freedom and the courage to make choices that align closely with one's authentic self. Existential therapy, influenced by these philosophical notions, strives to help individuals recognize their tendencies toward conformity and bad faith. It encourages them to assume responsibility for their choices and to live more authentically. Therapists aid clients in exploring their personal values, desires, and beliefs, separate from those absorbed from external influences. They focus on empowering the individual to reaffirm their capacity for self-determination and to pursue a more genuine way of living. Existentialism posits that the struggle against conformity and bad faith is ongoing. As cultures and social expectations evolve, so too must the individual continually reevaluate their relationship with these external forces. The goal is not to achieve a state of perfect authenticity, but rather to engage in a lifelong process of striving for authenticity. Through this, individuals can better navigate the complexities of existence and maintain a sense of agency over their lives. Ultimately, existentialism presents a framework for understanding the role of the individual in creating a genuine and meaningful existence. It asserts that by recognizing and overcoming the tendencies toward conformity and bad faith, individuals can live with a greater sense of freedom and authenticity. This journey requires conscious effort and introspection, but offers the possibility of a richer and more personally significant life. The existential challenge remains a deeply personal endeavor, where each individual must grapple with the conditions of their existence and answer the call to live authentically amidst the myriad pressures to conform. 4.4. Alienation and estrangement. In the study of existentialism, the concepts of alienation and estrangement are pivotal to understanding the individual's relationship with society, the self, and existence at its core. Alienation, a term widely discussed in philosophical writings, particularly by Karl Marx and later by existentialists such as Jean-Paul Sartre, refers to the separation of individuals from aspects of their human nature as a consequence of living within societal structures perceived as oppressive or inauthentic. Estrangement, often used interchangeably with alienation, embodies the individual's sense of disconnection or detachment from their essence or identity, typically as a result of external forces or societal pressures. Within existentialist discourse, alienation addresses the conflict between genuine personal inclinations and the roles and expectations imposed by society. An individual may feel alienated when their values do not align with societal norms, causing a rift between self-perception and reality. This form of estrangement reveals the tension between individual existence and collective existence, often leading to a profound sense of isolation and the feeling that one's true self is being suppressed or unrealized. The existentialist perspective here is not simply a matter of social critique, but an exploration into the personal experience of living inauthentically. This experience of alienation is not solely limited to interpersonal relationships or societal roles. It extends to all facets of human life, including labor, politics, and even leisure. For Marx, economic systems, especially capitalism, create a specific type of alienation in the form of workers being disconnected from the fruits of their labor, leading to a diminished sense of self and purpose. Through this lens, existentialists argue that inauthenticity in one's actions can lead to a broader sense of meaninglessness, further exasperating feelings of estrangement from one's essence and from humanity as a whole. In addressing alienation, existential philosophers emphasize the role of self-awareness and personal responsibility in overcoming estrangement. It is through conscious decision-making and the assertion of one's freedom that an individual can endeavor to live authentically, an existence where a person recognizes the societal structures that lead to alienation and chooses to live in a manner that reflects their true self. The responsibility for this lies solely with the individual, and the journey toward authenticity is an intrinsic and personal challenge. One outlet through which individuals can begin to understand and combat alienation is through the practice of reflection and self-examination. By regularly evaluating their actions, beliefs, and motivations, individuals may gain a clearer understanding of how their authentic self correlates with the roles they play within society. It is only through this rigorous self-scrutiny that one can identify the roots of their estrangement and formulate a means to reconnect with their essential being. Another persistent aspect of alienation, as explored by existentialists, is the inherent difficulty in achieving full authenticity within the confines of society's construct. The struggle for authenticity may be fraught with obstacles, as societal pressures are omnipresent and deeply rooted. The existentialists do not imply that a complete escape from alienation is feasible, but rather suggest that the process of striving towards authenticity is in itself a meaningful pursuit. Living authentically may be seen as a form of resistance against inauthentic societal forces and a defining feature of existential freedom. The process of overcoming alienation is, in essence, a transformative endeavor that requires a continuous reassessment of one's commitments and the societal structures that influence them. The existentialists advocate for the individual to lead a passionately involved life, meaning that one must embrace personal choices that resonate deeply with their individual essence. This way of existence acknowledges the inevitability of societal pressures, but encourages an ongoing resistance against the passive acceptance of those conditions. In sum, existentialist thought challenges individuals to recognize the alienation that permeates modern life. It calls upon them to consciously strive towards a mode of existence that is less fragmented and more reflective of their authentic values and aspirations. While existential philosophers acknowledge that complete freedom from alienation may be unattainable, they champion the continuous journey towards self-awareness and the celebration of individuality, even amidst societal constraints. Furthermore, the existential perspective on alienation and estrangement brings to light the notion of bad faith, which is the denial of freedom and the acceptance of external determinants as defining one's essence. By rejecting personal accountability and choosing to conform without question, individuals perpetuate their alienation and distance themselves further from realizing their potential for authenticity. The existentialists assert that confronting bad faith is essential for individuals to overcome alienation and engage genuinely with their existence. Lastly, the notion of alienation in existentialism is intricately bound to other key themes of the philosophy, including angst, despair, and absurdity. These feelings may arise when confronting the estrangement that alienation brings about, and they can serve as catalysts for the individual to reevaluate the nature of their existence. The existential journey towards authenticity, then, includes navigating through these complex emotions, understanding their origins, and ultimately using them as springboards toward living a more engaged and authentic life. Existentialism frames alienation as a multifaceted problem that encompasses the individual's relationship with society, work, self, and existence. Despite the seemingly ubiquitous nature of alienation, existential thought provides a pathway for individuals to understand and counteract the factors that lead to estrangement. It is through this understanding and active resistance that existentialists believe individuals can move toward a more authentic, liberated way of being, regardless of the unavoidable limitations imposed by the external world. 4.5. Self-deception and denial. Self-deception and denial are pivotal concepts in the study of existentialism, particularly when analyzing the individual's quest for authenticity. Self-deception may be understood as a process by which an individual unconsciously denies or rationalizes away the relevance, significance, or reality of a fact in order to avoid facing uncomfortable truths about themselves or their existence. Denial, a closely related concept, involves the conscious refusal to accept facts or realities that are too painful or threatening to one's sense of self. The interplay of these phenomena is seen as a barrier to achieving authenticity, a core aspiration in existential thought. In existentialism, the term authenticity refers to living in accordance with one's true self and values, rather than conforming to external pressures or societal norms. The journey towards authenticity requires an honest confrontation with one's situation, personal limitations, and the ultimate concerns of existence, such as death, meaninglessness, and isolation. The existentialists posit that many individuals fail to live authentically because they engage in self-deception or are in denial about these aspects of their condition. The nature of self-deception in the existential context is complex. It is not merely lying to oneself, but involves deeper psychological mechanisms that obscure one's view of reality. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre suggested that self-deception involves a bad faith refusal to confront the fundamental nature of our freedom and responsibility. For Sartre, every person has the freedom to choose and the capacity to determine their own meaning in life. However, acknowledging this freedom can be daunting, as it comes with the weight of responsibility for those choices. To avoid this unsettling reality, individuals deceive themselves into believing their choices are mandated by circumstances beyond their control. Denial, on the other hand, often operates as a more direct response to specific facets of one's life or situation that the individual finds intolerable. Denial can serve as a defense mechanism against existential angst, a sense of dread and anxiety that arises from facing the inherent conflicts of human existence, such as the inevitability of death and the absence of a predetermined purpose. When an individual is in denial, they might outright reject the existence of these conflicts or any evidence that points to their own mortality or the contingent nature of their values and beliefs. The mechanisms of self-deception and denial can manifest in various ways. One might exhibit these behaviors by embracing cultural or societal norms that offer a semblance of structure or meaning without questioning their personal validity. Another common expression is the adoption of roles or personas that provide a sense of identity, albeit one that may not align with the individual's true self or desires. In doing so, an individual avoids facing the anxiety that comes from acknowledging their own authenticity and the freedom it entails. The struggle against self-deception and denial is a continuous and arduous process, It requires persistent self-reflection and a willingness to face harsh truths. Individuals are often tempted to slide back into comfortable illusions, as the reality of their condition can lead to profound discomfort. This is where existentialist thinkers acknowledge the necessity of courage to break through the barriers of deceit and face one's existence head-on. Through the existential lens, coming to terms with the truth of one's situation is a prerequisite for personal growth and the pursuit of authenticity. The act of shedding self-deception and denial allows for a clearer understanding of oneself and one's place in the world. It involves not only recognizing the inherent freedoms and responsibilities one holds, but also actively engaging in the process of self-definition according to one's own standards, rather than those imposed from outside. The effect of overcoming self-deception and denial can be liberating. Though it may initially incite anxiety, such a breakthrough can lead to a more genuine existence. The existential claim is that only when an individual stops denying their fundamental freedom and capacity for self-definition can they truly begin to live authentically. Taking ownership of one's decisions and cultivating a life that reflects one's true values becomes possible. In practice, existential psychotherapy often focuses on helping individuals recognize and transcend their tendencies towards self-deception and denial. Therapists encourage clients to confront difficult existential realities by cultivating awareness and honesty. Such therapeutic approaches aim to empower individuals to make authentic choices and live in alignment with their genuine selves, despite the uncertainties and ambiguities of existence. In literature and philosophy, self-deception and denial are recurrent themes. Existentialist writers like Fyodor Dostoevsky, Soren Kierkegaard, and Albert Camus have explored these ideas through characters who grapple with the implications of freedom, the absurd, and the struggle to construct personal meaning in a world that offers no clear answers. Their narratives often illustrate the painful yet transformative journey from self-deception to self-realization. Self-deception and denial represent significant obstacles to achieving authenticity, an essential concern of existentialist thought. By recognizing and dismantling these barriers, individuals can embark on a path towards living more honestly and fulfilling their potential for authenticity. Acknowledging the intricate role these concepts play in the human experience allows for a deeper understanding of the challenges one faces in the search for meaning and the pursuit of a genuine existence. 4.6 Individualism versus collectivism. The distinction between individualism and collectivism represents a central debate within existentialist philosophy. Individualism posits that the individual's experience, freedoms, and choices are paramount, and that each person must define their own existence independently from others. Collectivism, on the other hand, points to the interconnectedness of humans and argues that the community, culture, or society plays a crucial role in shaping individuals and the meaning of their lives. From an existentialist perspective, individualism emphasizes personal responsibility and authenticity. This entails the idea that individuals are responsible for their actions and the subsequent consequences without recourse to external determinants, such as societal norms or divine commands. Authenticity involves living a life that is true to one's own values and beliefs, despite external pressures. It means acknowledging one's freedom and using it to create a life that is reflective of one's true self, rather than simply conforming to what is expected by others. While existentialism advocates for the importance of the individual, it does not inherently disregard the importance of the community. Many existentialists argue that human beings are inherently social creatures and that interaction with others is essential for a fulfilling life. However, they maintain that community should not impose a collective identity to the extent that it suppresses individual freedom and authenticity. Balance must be struck between one's individuality and any collective identities one may hold. One of the key challenges individualism faces is the possibility of isolation. When an individual prioritizes personal freedom above all else, there may be a tendency toward alienation, as social ties and communal responsibilities are regarded as secondary. This isolation can lead to a sense of disconnection from others, which existentialists argue is antithetical to the human condition. For existentialism, while individualism is important, it should not lead to a total withdrawal from society, but rather spur constructive engagement with it. On the other hand, collectivism stresses the importance of social roles, traditions, and cooperation. In a collectivist society, the needs and goals of the group are often placed above those of the individual. Collectivism can prove beneficial in fostering strong social bonds and a sense of belonging. However, existentialists critique that this can also lead to a suppression of individual differences and potentially cause individuals to lead inauthentic lives if they are conforming to societal expectations at the expense of their personal values. Collectivism is also scrutinized by existentialists for potentially infringing upon personal freedom. When the collective dictates the course of an individual's life, it infringes on their freedom to choose and to self-define. This loss of individual freedom is fundamentally at odds with existentialist thought, which holds individual agency as a cornerstone of an authentic life. Nonetheless, existentialists do acknowledge the role of society in providing context for personal choices and recognize the inevitability of social influence. Comparatively, individualism correlates with the existential concept of angst, or existential anxiety. This form of anxiety arises from the realization of the vast possibilities of freedom and the weight of responsibility that accompanies it. An individualistic view amplifies this experience by insisting that one must navigate these challenges alone, without relying on predetermined roles or societal guidelines. Existential anxiety can be a catalyst for personal growth as it pushes one towards making conscious, authentic choices. Collectivism, alternatively, may mitigate existential anxiety by providing a framework within which individuals can understand and perform their roles. However, this can come at the cost of discouraging the self-examination and personal growth that existentialists endorse. When individuals are deeply embedded in collective identities, they may become less likely to question these cultural narratives and explore their own unique path. Moreover, there may be little room for the divergence that fosters the growth of the individual. The balance between individualism and collectivism remains a complex and nuanced issue. A number of existential thinkers propose that an authentic individual can and should construct dimensions of their identity through personal, selective integration into social constructs. They advocate for the individual's engagement with society, recognizing its value, but without relinquishing personal autonomy and responsibility. The challenging duality of simultaneously embracing personal freedom while contributing to a community thus becomes a central theme in existential discourse. The tension between individualism and collectivism is a persistent theme within existentialist thought. While existentialism places a heavy emphasis on personal freedom, choice, and responsibility, it does not do so in complete disregard of the social context. The philosophy calls upon individuals to navigate the pressures of society while maintaining an authentic existence, true to their values and choices. This requires recognition of the interplay between the individual's innate desire for autonomy and the unavoidable influence of the collective, which together shape the human experience. It is through this delicate balance that existentialism seeks to address the inherent conflicts and the potential for harmony within the nexus of the individual and society. Section 4.7. The Look of the Other. The concept of the look of the other is fundamental to existential thought, particularly in the philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre. At its core, it pertains to the realization of one's own subjectivity when confronted by another consciousness. It is through this encounter with the other's gaze that individuals become acutely aware of themselves as objects in the world. This experience is intrinsic in shaping an individual's understanding of self and the subsequent sense of authenticity that they may strive towards or recoil from. Sartre postulated that the encounter with the other's gaze is more than a simple recognition of another person. It is an interaction that transforms one's experience of the world. When we are looked at by another, we suddenly see ourselves from the perspective of that other. This shift from being a subject, the one who sees, into an object, the one who is seen, can be disorienting. It introduces a social dimension to our existence where we are not just beings in the world, but also beings for others. This alteration in perception under the gaze of another leads to what Sartre describes as the shame of self. It is a pivotal moment where the individual becomes critically aware of their external projection and how their actions and appearance might be interpreted by someone else. Shame in this context is an acknowledgement of how we are seen by others, which can often stand in stark contrast to how we perceive ourselves. It is not solely a negative emotion. Rather, it is a reflective process that forces individuals to confront their external existence. Another important aspect in the dynamic of the look is the concept of freedom. The recognition of another's freedom, as well as our own, becomes abundantly clear when we are under someone else's gaze. In being conscious of the other's freedom to judge or evaluate us, we are confronted with the responsibility for our actions. Our choices, behaviors, and even outward appearances are suddenly subject to an external appraisal. This realization can lead to a heightened sense of autonomy, but it can also provoke anxiety about our capability to be the authors of our own identities. Authenticity, then, becomes a complex pursuit in the realm of the other. To be authentic, according to existentialist philosophy, is to act according to one's own values and beliefs, rather than conforming to external expectations or pressures. However, under the look of the other, the individual must navigate the tension between their authentic self and the self that is perceived by others. There is a balance to be struck between disregarding external judgments and acknowledging the intersubjective nature of human existence. This interplay between the self and the other necessitates a constant negotiation of identity. As individuals, we are not isolated beings. We exist within a web of social relationships that influence and, in some cases, dictate aspects of our identity. The desire for authenticity must therefore be reconciled with the inevitable impact of societal norms, roles, and expectations. The challenge lies in determining which aspects of our identity are truly ours and which are imposed upon us. Striving for authenticity in light of the other's gaze can lead individuals down divergent paths. Some may conform to the perceived expectations of others, constructing a persona that is readily accepted but feels alien to their own self-conception. Others may rebel against these perceptions, asserting their individuality even at the risk of social alienation. The existential quest for authenticity demands a degree of self-awareness and courage to live in accordance with one's values amidst these external pressures. The burden of external judgment also raises the issue of reciprocity in the look. While we can feel objectified by the gaze of another, we too have the power to objectify others. This dual capability to see and be seen reflects the shared vulnerability of our condition. We are all subjects who desire to be seen as individuals with depth and agency, yet we are also capable of reducing others to mere objects when we fail to recognize their complexity. Reflecting on the look of the other encourages us to consider the ethical implications of our interactions. It calls for an acknowledgement of mutual subjectivity, where we both recognize and respect the individuality and freedom of others. By doing so, we can navigate the social realm without diminishing the authenticity of ourselves or others. This ethical dimension is paramount in existential thought, which emphasizes the interconnectedness of freedom, responsibility, and respect for individual agency. The look of the other is a critical concept in understanding existentialism's portrayal of personal authenticity. It points out how our awareness of ourselves as individuals is heightened when we interact with others, especially under their gaze. It is in these moments of recognition, reflection, and relationship that the individual's sense of self and the pursuit of authenticity are continuously shaped and redefined. By engaging with the look of the other, we are called upon to balance our freedom and subjectivity with the recognition of the same capacities in every person we encounter. Section 4.8: Death and the Individual. The contemplation of death has always been a fundamental aspect of existential philosophy. In existential thought, the inevitability of death is not merely a biological fact, but a crucial component in understanding the individual's place in the world. An individual's confrontation with the reality of their mortality is regarded as a significant moment of awakening, where one becomes acutely aware of the finite nature of existence. This encounter with the prospect of non-existence compels the individual to reflect on the meaning and value of their choices, actions, and existence as a whole. Existentialists argue that the awareness of death distinguishes humans from other beings. It is through this awareness that individuals come to recognize the urgency of living authentically. Authenticity in this context refers to living in a manner that is true to oneself, rather than conforming to the expectations or norms imposed by society. The prospect of death intensifies the need for authenticity, as it underscores the limited time one has to realize their potential and to forge a path that is genuinely their own. The knowledge that life is finite is also thought to enhance the individual's sense of freedom. With death as a definitive endpoint, the individual is free to determine the course of their life, unbounded by the idea of an infinite future in which to postpone actions or decisions. This freedom also bears with it a weighty responsibility. Since life is temporal, each choice carries substantial significance, as it could potentially be one's last. The freedom to choose, then, becomes also a duty to choose wisely, and with consideration of the life one desires to lead. Death's role as a source of meaning is paradoxical within existentialism. On one hand, the permanent cessation of existence leads to the placing of life in sharp relief, allowing for a deeper comprehension of life's inherent value. On the other hand, the absurdity of working toward projects and goals only to ultimately cease to exist confronts individuals with the possibility of life's inherent meaninglessness. In response to this, existentialists propose that meaning is not an intrinsic property of life, but something that individuals must construct for themselves through their engagements and choices. According to existential philosophy, the tendency to deny or avoid the thought of death is prevalent in human behavior. This tendency is seen as a form of inauthenticity or bad faith. By denying the reality of death, individuals often lead lives that are routine and unexamined, leaving little room for the pursuit of unique values or personal fulfillment. Existentialists encourage individuals to confront the reality of their own mortality in order to break free from such denial and live more fully. Another common response to the issue of death in existential philosophy is the concept of being toward death. Heidegger used this term to describe a mode of existence where the individual lives with the conscious recognition that death could occur at any moment. This orientation towards death is not supposed to engender a morbid preoccupation, but rather inspire a heightened state of living in which the individual is constantly aware of the preciousness of each moment and the importance of living in alignment with their true self. Facing death is also considered an isolating experience within existential thought. The reality that death is an intensely personal experience that cannot be shared or fully understood by others underscores the notion of individual isolation. Regardless of how much support one finds in relationships and communities, the journey towards death is ultimately undertaken alone. This individual nature of death compels a deeper personal reckoning with one's beliefs and choices, emphasizing the individual's unique existence and the necessity for personal authenticity. Dealing constructively with the concept of death, existentialists suggest, can lead to a profound transformation in an individual's life. Instead of paralyzing the individual with fear, the acceptance of mortality can stimulate creativity, passion, and the desire to engage meaningfully with the world. This transformation may manifest in the pursuit of goals and projects that resonate on a personal level, the deepening of relationships, or an increased dedication to causes that transcend one's own lifetime. For existential philosophy, to ignore death is to miss out on a critical aspect of existence that shapes our being in the world. Rather than treating death as a taboo subject or an uncomfortable truth, it is posited as an essential consideration for anyone seeking to live an authentic life. The existentialists challenge individuals to integrate the reality of death into their daily consciousness, using it as a motivating force toward the creation of a personally significant existence. Within existential philosophy, the individual's relationship with death is not simply a matter of biological destiny, but a complex component of what it means to live an authentic life. Confrontation with death is seen as a potential source of freedom, meaning, and self-realization, as well as an impetus for living intentionally and with a clear sense of personal responsibility. By accepting the inevitability of death, individuals are encouraged to create lives of authenticity, shaping their existence with consciousness, purpose, and integrity. 4.9 Creating the Self. Existentialism posits that existence precedes essence, implying that individuals are not born with a predetermined nature or destiny. Rather, it is the responsibility of each person to create their own essence through actions, decisions, and choices. Creating the self is an existentialist concept that emphasizes the role of the individual in shaping their identity and purpose. This process is continuous, dynamic, and deeply personal. Creating the self involves an acute awareness of one's freedom and the burden of choice that accompanies it. Existential philosophers such as Jean-Paul Sartre argue that humans are condemned to be free. Individuals cannot escape the responsibility that comes with this freedom. In shaping oneself, every action and choice contributes to the defining of one's character and, by extension, one's essence. It can be argued that creating the self is a project that is both liberating and daunting. It is liberating because individuals have the authority to defy preordained categories and societal roles. However, it is also daunting because they must navigate the inherent uncertainty of an undefined existence. The responsibility for every success and failure lies solely on the individual's shoulders in the existentialist viewpoint. In contrast to deterministic perspectives, the existential emphasis on self-creation allows for a multiplicity of selves. That is, there are endless possibilities for who one might become. This viewpoint encourages diversity and flexibility in personal identity, suggesting that the self is not a static entity but an evolving project. Humans are understood not as fixed beings but as beings in process, constantly in the act of defining themselves. Creating the self isn't just a philosophical or psychological endeavor, it has practical implications. For instance, the choices one makes in career, relationships, and beliefs are all expressions of this self-creation process. Through these choices, people communicate to others and to themselves who they are. The quest for authenticity, a central theme in existentialism, is closely tied to the deliberate choices that shape the self. Authenticity involves being true to one's own values, desires, and beliefs, rather than conforming to external pressures or societal expectations. In the act of creating the self, a person must constantly differentiate between actions that authentically reflect their individual nature and those that are imposed by external influences. The struggle for authenticity requires ongoing reflection and self-assessment. Moreover, creating the self is not designed to be a solitary journey. Although it emphasizes personal responsibility, existentialists acknowledge that individuals are social beings. Interpersonal relationships and societal contexts play pivotal roles in the formation of the self. A person's interactions with others can challenge, reinforce, or modify their sense of self, making self-creation an intersubjective process as well. In the context of creating the self, emotions act as important signals. They convey information about what is significant to the individual and can guide the decision-making process. Emotions, in their complexity, must be understood and integrated into the self-creation process. They reveal personal values and assist in the navigation of life's choices. Creating the self also involves a temporal dimension which encompasses one's past, present, and future. How an individual perceives their past experiences and future aspirations influences their current choices and sense of identity. An authentic self-creation takes into account the lessons of the past as well as the goals for the future, contextualizing them in the present actions of the individual. The philosophical perspective on creating the self does not imply that the process is exclusively rational or analytical. It acknowledges the role of the irrational, the unconscious, and the inexplicable aspects of human existence. These elements, too, contribute to the making of the self, often exerting influence in subtle or indirect ways. Finally, the existentialist view on creating the self is closely aligned with the notion of existential freedom. It suggests that in understanding their inherent freedom, individuals can harness it to pursue an authentic life. The realization of this freedom is manifested in the intentional choices a person makes, which together construct the narrative of the self. The ongoing challenge for each individual is to remain conscious of this freedom and to exercise it responsibly in the pursuit of a self-defined existence. Creating the self is the fundamental existentialist act. It is the process by which individuals determine their identities and make their essence through a series of choices and actions. This process acknowledges the complex interplay of freedom, responsibility, authenticity, and the social fabric. It is characterized by continual growth, reassessment, and the pursuit of a genuine life. The existential challenge is to take up this task with deliberation and courage, forging a singular path that reflects one's true self amidst the myriad of life's possibilities. 4.10 Authenticity in modern society. In contemporary society, the concept of authenticity is often valorized as a crucial aspect of individual identity and self-fulfillment. Authenticity, from an existential standpoint, involves the individual aligning their actions with their true self and beliefs, irrespective of societal pressures or expectations. It requires a level of self-awareness and courage to live in accordance with one's discovered or chosen values. This challenge is amplified in modern society, where the proliferation of social norms, roles, and digital personas can obscure the individual's quest for authenticity. The onslaught of social media platforms has fundamentally altered the landscape in which individuals seek to express and assert their authenticity. These platforms present users with the paradoxical task of crafting an online presence that both conforms to the curated standards of digital communities and feels true to oneself. The constant demand for engagement and the perfect depiction of life can exacerbate feelings of inauthenticity. It forces individuals to question whether they are presenting an honest portrayal of their lives or succumbing to the lure of social validation. Moreover, the commercialization of authenticity has become a prevalent force in consumer culture. Brands now often encourage consumers to be themselves in a bid to create a perceived personal connection with their products, thereby leveraging the idea of authenticity for profit. As a result, authenticity is at risk of being commodified, its significance diluted by its transformation into a marketing buzzword. In such an environment, distinguishing between a genuine expression of the self and commercially influenced behavior becomes increasingly difficult. In the workplace, the demand for authenticity is clear, yet often shadowed by the need to maintain professionalism and adhere to organizational cultures. Employees may find themselves navigating the delicate balance between expressing their true personalities and tempering them to fit within the corporate structure. Consequently, authenticity in a professional setting may be more about finding alignment between one's own values and those of the workplace, rather than an unrestricted exhibition of individuality. Within the realm of interpersonal relationships, the idea that authenticity fosters deeper connections holds true. Authenticity requires vulnerability, allowing others to see one's strengths, weaknesses, hopes, and doubts. Engaging in this level of transparency can be daunting, but is essential in building sincere relationships. However, the prevailing culture of idealized lifestyle portrayals and selective sharing, especially online, can lead to a superficial understanding and connection between individuals. The educational system is another critical arena for the discussion of authenticity. From an early age, individuals are inculcated with societal values through formal education. While educational institutions can serve as catalysts for personal growth and the discovery of authentic interests and talents, they can also impose standardized benchmarks of success. Educational models that emphasize conformity and standardized testing may hinder the development of individual critical thinking and self-authenticity, asking students to fit molds rather than forge their paths. In the political sphere, authenticity is a double-edged sword. Politicians who are perceived as authentic can engender trust and garner support from their constituents. However, the political stage is also rife with examples of feigned authenticity, whereby public figures craft personas that resonate with voters but may not reflect their true selves or intentions. In this way, the pursuit of authenticity in politics is often entangled with the desire for power and influence rather than a genuine representation of one's beliefs. Existentially speaking, the individual's search for authenticity in a modern context is a complex endeavor that necessitates introspection and resilience. As the individual confronts the myriad external influences of the current age, they are challenged to distinguish between true self-expression and the various manifestations of inauthenticity imposed by societal constructs. Authenticity becomes a conscious choice rather than an automatic state of being. Its pursuit is an ongoing process that requires constant negotiation between the self and the external world. Given the challenging landscape for authenticity, the role of self-reflection becomes paramount. Individuals must thoroughly examine their motivations, desires, and values to steer clear of inauthentic patterns of behavior. This introspective process is not static, but rather a dynamic continuum that can lead to growth and an evolving sense of self. The willingness to question and reassess oneself is fundamental to maintaining authenticity in an ever-changing societal context. Authenticity in modern society is both a personal aspiration and a cultural ideal, fraught with complexities and contradictions. It must be approached with a balance of self-understanding and adaptability, ensuring that one's actions and decisions are congruent with their genuine self. While today's world presents numerous obstacles to living authentically, it also offers unique opportunities for individuals to explore and affirm their identities. The quest for authenticity, in essence, is an integral part of the human experience, prompting individuals to continually engage with and refine their understanding of what it means to lead a genuine and meaningful life.